Welcome back, everyone. We've spent this week looking at how drugs move, from international fentanyl supply chains to domestic meth labs. But what happens when the demand side of a drug market collapses? That's the case with marijuana, at least in part. Today's lecture is going to focus on how marijuana legalization and decriminalization have transformed the U.S. marketplace over the last 15 years and how cartels and criminal enterprises have responded. Our goals today are to understand the economic impact of legislation on the black market. We're also going to explore how traffickers and producers have adapted their strategies, and we're also going to consider what these shifts mean for drug enforcement going forward. And spoiler alert, when the legal market eats at your profits, you just don't disappear, you pivot. So let's start with a little bit of context. In 2012, both Colorado and Washington State became the first U.S. states to legalize recreational marijuana. Since then, over half of the U.S. has followed suit in some form, either legalizing recreational use, expanding medicinal use, or decriminalizing small amounts for personal use. This created a regulated legal market, meaning that growers, processors, and dispensaries all operate under state law, are subject to inspections, licensing, taxes, the whole shebang. But marijuana remains federally illegal, classified as a Schedule I controlled substance. Remember, that's in the same category as both heroin and LSD. This creates a few problems. First, it creates some banking limitations, meaning that most cannabis businesses operate only in cash. There is also a cross-state enforcement gray zone in many areas and a patchwork of legality that traffickers can still often exploit. So what do we end up with as a result? Well, now we have overlapping markets, which means a growing legal industry, but it also means that there is a shrinking but still active domestic black market. And finally, it creates an increasingly complex enforcement environment surrounding marijuana. So what exactly did legalization then do to the cartels? Well, for years, Mexican cartels have made billions exporting marijuana into the U.S. But after legalization began, profits began to plummet. Why? Well, because U.S. grown marijuana became cheaper, it became higher quality, and legal in many places. This led to a few important cartel responses. First, it meant that we needed to exit the market. Many Mexican growers simply stopped cultivating marijuana. According to the DEA report, seizures of Mexican marijuana at the border dropped by over 80% between 2013 and 2022. And really, the shift meant that they could focus on other drugs. Cartels shifted to higher profit markets, including meth, fentanyl, and counterfeit pills. These products are stronger, they're more compact, and far more addictive than marijuana. It also allowed for undercutting the legal market. In some states, cartels have tried to compete by producing cheap, unregulated cannabis and trafficking it into high-tax states like California or New York, where legal prices are often higher than those on the black market. And finally, they often infiltrated the legal market. There are documented cases of cartel-linked entities that are investing in or infiltrating licensed grow operations, using front companies or fake documentations to make their move. This blends legal and illegal activity in ways that are often hard to detect. So, even as legalization shrinks one revenue stream, cartels are finding new ways to exploit those gaps. So let's talk about enforcement here in the legalized states. You think that legalization would eliminate illegal growing, right? Well, not exactly. In states like California and Oregon, where cannabis is legal, enforcement has actually become more complicated. And why would that be? Well, one reason is often oversupply. Legal growers sometimes produce more than they're allowed, and then they sell back the excess product on the black market, often carrying it across state lines. There are often unlicensed grows, particularly in rural areas where authorities have found thousands of acres of illegal cannabis farms that are operating outside of the regulated system. We also see labor exploitation. Some illegal grow operations are tied to labor trafficking and poor working conditions, particularly among migrant workers. And we also can see there are environmental and water-based crimes happening as well. Illegal grows often divert water, use banned pesticides, and degrade legal ecosystems, particularly in drought-prone regions. So while legalization has reduced some enforcement burdens, it also created a new class of enforcement issues, ones that blend agriculture, labor, and environmental law with drug policy. Legalization has had a clear economic impact in terms of devaluation of cartel-grown marijuana, but it also contributed indirectly to the rise in trafficking of more dangerous drugs. Think about it this way. It's 2008 and cannabis is a top source of cartel income. By 2020, fentanyl and meth had taken over marijuana's place due to higher margins, lower detection rates, and growing synthetic markets. And it's not all legalization's fault per se, but it's important policy consideration. Shrinking one market doesn't automatically reduce crime. It reshapes it. Enforcement and interdiction must evolve alongside these shifts. If officers are still focused on bulk marijuana shipments, they're fighting yesterday's war. So let's recap. Marijuana legalization has restructured the drug market, especially for cannabis. Cartels responded by exiting the weed industry, reinvesting in synthetic drugs, and in some cases, infiltrating the legal weed industry. Domestic enforcement is still challenged by unlicensed grows, regulatory loopholes, and interstate smuggling. And the bigger takeaway? Policy shapes markets, and the markets are going to respond in real time. As we continue into our next lecture, we'll shift from the supply chains to accountability, asking ourselves who should be held responsible for the consequences of drug policy. We'll look at opioid manufacturers, drug-induced homicide laws, and the ongoing debate around harm reduction. Thanks for sticking with me today. I'll see you all next time in class. Thanks and have a great day.